Welcome to We the World and our 2025 MLK Manifesting the Dream event. Each year, we take time to remember Martin Luther King Jr. and his beloved community. And each year, we are thrilled to feature the many people and organizations who have taken action to be of service, not only in January and February, but all year round. We at We the World welcome you to take action and be of service at we.net/MLK from January 15th to February 28th. Please join us in being a part of this annual celebration and consider being of service in your communities and with us. Of course, donations are very appreciated at we.net/donate. My name is Yana Larson, and I am the HR Deputy Director of We the World. Today, we are lucky to have a very wonderful conversation with our guests. Thato Angelina Gabaitse is a Gaborone, Botswana-based entrepreneur and philanthropist. As founder and director of Lemon and Vinegar Ltd., she specializes in the distribution of agricultural produce, machinery, and equipment. With 6 years of experience in livestock and rain-fed crop management, Thato is a qualified horticulture enterprise manager providing consulting and advisory services. She is passionate about building partnerships and engaging stakeholders to develop impactful programs addressing social constructs like age, gender, and race. Thato excels at team building and program construction tailored to specific event and thematic needs. She is also a longtime We the World volunteer and mother and valued member of our team, and we love her. Thank you, Thato, for bringing your guest to our MLK event, and let us begin.
Thank you so much, Yana, for the warm welcome and to our listeners. On today's session, we'll be delving deeper in protecting vulnerable youth in conflict zones. We'll be discussing global strategies for supporting displaced youth amidst the crisis. With our wonderful, well-experienced panel, they will be proposing actionable strategies for addressing the global impact of displacement by climate change, conflict, and political instability. And the discussion will focus on amplifying youth-led peace-building initiatives while offering insights into how these initiatives can influence policymaking in host countries, regions, and the international space. One of our speakers, Chukwudi Iweh, is a peacebuilding and development practitioner with over 7 years in policy influencing and advocacy. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics. Chukwudi has dedicated over 7 years of his life towards building peaceful, resilient communities working in front lines, influencing and advocating for peace building and developing economic policies for sustainable peace in Africa. Another speaker, well-rounded, Emmanuel Sskitto, who has been acting as a project coordinator, is a visual artist, painter with over 8 years of experience. He is the founder of Faces Up Uganda, an NGO that empowers underprivileged children through creative arts and mentorship. He holds a second-class upper bachelor's degrees in industrial and fine art from Makerere University. He's an alumni from well-established organizations. And in the interest of time, as you have heard, these are folks who are well acquainted with the topic. So on today's conversation, our opening question is, from your experience, what are the most pressing challenges displaced youth face in conflict zones? We'll start with you, Emmanuel, and then we'll hand over to Chukwudi.
Can you hear me? Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Thato, and also the wonderful viewers, but also the panel and also the team from we.net. My name is Emmanuel Sskitto. I'm joining this call in Uganda and joining from our space we call the Theatre of Dreams, a community health center that serves children from underserved communities. Again, especially in this age and these years, talking about displacement, every person in several different ways encounters displacement at the different problems of life. Some because of the recurrent civil wars, because of the recurrent political instabilities. For example, in the neighborhood in Uganda, in DRC, many youth, many young people, children, families, animals, everything is being displaced. With displacement comes with a lot of challenges. Some are financial, some are emotional, some are social, some are political. There's so many, but I take these three as the key issues, especially working with these young people that I've come to realize. The loss of self. You find that in a space, because of the political instabilities, displaced individuals lose themselves. It's one thing to move from one place to the other, carry your body and your property, but it's the other to leave behind your memories and your love and the attachment and association. Interacting with children and the youth, each and every time, they always refer back to where they came from. Even when they're in a space that, let's say Uganda, because Uganda hosts the highest number of refugees in East Africa and Africa, you find that the appointment the children mention is when we were home, we used to do this. I remember my friends, there's so much self that is left behind, even when we moved our bodies. And that takes a lot of time, or even takes forever for them to ever recover. With a lot of young people being displaced, we find that there's so much, they are socially affected. They have no communities, because when you come into a community, for example, when you settle in refugee settlements, an example in the context of Uganda, when displaced people from their countries come, they're put into refugee settlements. These are extremely highly populated small areas. They're extremely underserved in so many different ways. Even though so many key players are trying to extend services, but many of these young people never get the opportunity to access services that they truly, truly need. And you find that because of such instances, many of them feel rejected in the communities that they come in. Even though host communities are extremely welcoming, they never feel truly being embraced, because the culture is different. There's no access to education. Finding food is extremely hard, but also finding employment is also another case. So you find that it distracts so many things. You find that, let me give you an example in Uganda. When refugees settle in Uganda, displaced people are, let's say, they're displaced by climate change, they're displaced because of war. When they come to Uganda, it is so heartening that every month they only get a compensation of less than $10. They're given a portion of amount is less than $10, and this amount of money is supposed to take care of each and everything regarding food, healthcare, education. Like, it's only that amount that is not even enough to be spent in a second. that is they're given. You find that because of such an environment, these people never get the opportunity to enjoy the life that each and every person deserves. And also you find that another challenge that displacement people face, there is a lot of pressure that comes from being displaced. I don't know about in your country, but in a moment where someone identifies themselves as a refugee, in the sense asylum seekers, everyone looks at them with this side eye because they feel they're not part of them. This is such a tough position many of the displaced people sit in, live in, work in, interact with, because the society is not seeing them as their own. So I find that at so many levels, this affects their social emotional well-being. It affects their self-belief as individuals, but also continuously reinforces the trauma that they already have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Chukwudi. Let's hear from your experiences.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you once again. I would just want to appreciate the team of With the World and also Emmanuel for the wonderful speech. From my experience, young people, internally displaced young people go through a lot. You know, the challenges they go through is multidimensional, in the sense that it cut across disconnection from family, which impact on their social lives, also affects their education. It affects the socioeconomic aspects of young people. But most importantly, the aspects what Emmanuel hinged on identity, which often boils down to issue of their mental health and leading to substance abuse and other challenges that comes with displacement. So young people often, what displacement does to young persons is that it increases their vulnerability. It increases the vulnerability of young persons, the gender perspective in terms of women, sexual exploitation, in terms of recruitment by extremist groups, and from the perspective of children to woman trafficking and child exploitation too. So there are lots of dimensions to challenges of internally displaced youth. And working in the field of internal displacement, in the field of peace building generally, what I think that major aspects of that are the protection need of internal displaced youths, because oftentimes when displacement occurs, and maybe either the subnational or the national government may just move in immediately just to provide immediate succor in terms of intervention, maybe evacuation to move them, maybe to hinterlands, other wherever the government may deem fit for the just temporary stay. But the challenging comes with abandonment. Because when after the incident occurs, okay, maybe you give it like a month or just 2 weeks, 3 weeks, when the media attention has been shifted, government seems to move on as if nothing happens. And that is where the danger comes in, especially in terms of youth vulnerability. Number one, integration with the host community, because I've been in the fields where we find out that, okay, already the community is underserved. And again, they were being chosen as maybe IDP camp is located there. And now government attention focuses mainly on the IDP youth, leaving the already underserved youth within the community. And this often heightens the tensions. It causes rift between the host community youth and the internally displaced youth. So it is another dimension of conflict leading that can equally, if not properly managed, that exacerbates the conditions of young persons in conflict context. So it's always is interlinked. And you talk about the socio-economic aspect of them, the loss of a source of family livelihood, which often increases poverty. Is it the access to education? Is it poor documentation, which often denies young persons from accessing services, maybe in terms of healthcare, in terms of other social services that they will help them to live a dignified life. So you find out that the context is interconnected. It's always interconnected, and internal displaced persons, especially young persons, are disproportionately affected when it comes to you want to disaggregate the data of internal displaced persons. So just for time's sake, young persons, displacement increases vulnerability of young persons.
Thank you very much. You guys have shared quite a lot on displacement and vulnerabilities. And this brought me back to one of our former presidents used to say that a nation that doesn't know its history is a lost nation. And I can imagine that for a person coming in with a loss of heritage, loss of culture, it causes conflict within themselves. And even then, after that, with the limitations that they have to even integrate into a place that they are not familiar with. And now and then you hear of successful peace building initiatives that are recognized by in the international space. And some of them, it can be quite troubling because they're mostly used for media and tokenism, and not really to address the root cause of how we got there in the first place. So what are the youth-led initiatives? How can we ensure that these are not only recognized, but actively integrated into the formal peace building processes? We'll start with you, Emmanuel and Chukwudi, so that the other can also have time to reflect as well.
Can you re-echo the question again?
How can we ensure that youth-led initiatives are not only recognized, but actively integrated into formal peace-building processes?
Thank you very much. There's always a saying that if you work with the youth without them in the room, you are working against the youth. And it is very important in the sense of the communities, displaced communities, the people that are displaced, but also the communities within which they are resettled. Involving both parties is very important to make it sustainable, to make it intentional, but to make it even purposeful to serve the intentions of addressing and also contributing to peace building. what sometimes happens is many discussions with great intentions happen in spaces where displacement is not happening. Let's give an example. Discussions to settle the crisis in Rwanda M23 are happening on television stations. They're happening in boardrooms that are well furnished, well with AC, aircon, everything, in spaces that don't yield and pick the true understanding of what exactly is happening on the ground. Because of that unrelatable experience in these spaces, what comes out as resolutions and steps and measures are never contextualized what's exactly happening on ground. So for me, with experience and also seeing what truly works, these discussions need to happen in the communities. Recently, I was in Rwanda last month, and I had the opportunity to visit the Genocide Memorial in Kigali, a museum that is dedicated to educate people about the genocide of 1994, where the Hutus and Tutsis fought and more than 10 million people were killed. The conversation around reconciliation and forgiveness is happening at the same grounds where these people were buried. The people that are preaching about reconciliation and forgiveness are some of the victims who lost their families, who lost their loved ones, but some of the victims in the two tribes that were fighting each other with so much forces behind them. But why I bring that as reference, it's because the conversation of forgiveness to build peace, to forgive each other and move forward is happening at the same grounds where these people are buried. In that, it gives context to why it is very important. But in the sense, when discussions and initiatives that truly wants to do good happen in a space that does not relate to the situations of these people, some of the suggestions, some of the ideas are not contextualized and are not relevant. So I believe it's very important for the policymakers, for the government, for the development partners to have the people that are being affected come up with the solutions in that same space and implement and take coexistence. And another thing is, how do we truly make investment? To rebuild nations requires a lot of resources, which are both financial and non-financial. Many youth peace builders, youth initiatives, brilliant ideas, good intentions, evidence-based approaches are never supported. Why? Because they are formed up of displaced people. Maybe these people are looking for something to eat, not to implement these brilliant ideas. Maybe this money is too much to be implemented in a program in Uganda, but it's small money to be implemented in a program in the US. How do the financing of peace building movements be equitable, but also truly practice what is being preached? Because these movements need a lot of support to be effective, to also spread the impact of their initiatives. Another way is building on the ideas that have worked somewhere and fine-tuning them to work in another context, like transfer of knowledge. Let me give an example. We did a project, a mural project in a refugee settlement in Uganda. This refugee settlement is called Nache Valley. This refugee settlement is hosting approximately 80% of the refugees in the country. Currently, we have 1.5 million refugees, displaced people in Uganda. The number keeps increasing. Mostly from DRC, South Sudan, Burundi, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. But these are several people coming from diverse backgrounds coming in one place. There were some internal fights that kept happening because this tribe never wanted each other back home. So that means they carried that kind of practices even in the displaced settlement areas. So what we did, we created a mural where all these people are painting together. It wasn't only about them painting beautiful works, but creating a community where their differences are not the factor of measure for their abilities. Where it was not about who are you back home, who are you, but how do you contribute to a shared goal with everyone else here? I tell you, during the conversation, one of the youth mentioned that sometimes we hate people even without knowing. But because it's a practice that we have carried on and practice that we have seen other people carry on, that means it's the right way to go. We got the same project, transferred it to another refugee settlement. Because we saw it is working in one refugee settlement, but then we transferred to another settlement. But what happened, instead of painting murals on the walls, this time around we were painting on canvases. Because the context there were no permanent walls that we would use to paint such works that would pass on this information of peace building, that would promote coexistence to the public. But we're like, how do we contextualize this same kind of best approach, best practice in a new environment, but that with a new approach that serves that specific environment? So for me, I concretely encourage using the best models that have been identified, replicating them in new areas, but contextualizing them to the local needs of the people. Trust me, the solutions are within the communities. The solutions are within the affected, the displaced people. They know best what they want. But what happens, sometimes they are given what does not serve their needs in the long run. They're given the growth, which is very important, but not educated around how do we even mitigate these disagreements? How do we coexist in diversity? How do we appreciate diversity? How do we overcome hate speech? How do we truly understand and appreciate life as a very key important right for every person? So I believe it's very much important to involve the people that are affected in coming up with these solutions, but also from their solutions and the ideas that they have to implement, scale, and replicate them into different areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Chukwudi.
Okay. Could you provide the question again?
How can we ensure youth-led initiatives are not only recognized, but actively integrated into formal peace-building processes?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you again, Emmanuel, for spoken. Ensuring that youth-led in peace-building initiatives are not just being used for just media hypes or for tokenism, rather being integrated as a sustainable plan to build a very sustainable, peaceful society. First, I believe, and based on the experiences had and successful implementation of peaceful projects, I think just what Emmanuel said, integration of young people or involvement of young people in policy making. That is where it starts from, inclusion. Because oftentimes when consultation happens, most times young persons are excluded because they feel that policymakers or leaders feel that they are inexperienced. They feel that they are not qualified. They feel, what do you actually know to contribute? Okay, this experience, I love hitting this point most times because I've experienced it multiple times myself, where a lot of times where maybe in a forum, where others forums, communities, oftentimes get excluded. Then I tend to question, this is where the difference comes in based on your exposure and experience, capacities, and what you know, and how you can engage and negotiate. So it has often happened. So most times I tend to reflect, okay, if I myself can experience this at this level, what happens to other young persons who are not as experienced or as exposed as I am, who lives in interior communities? Okay, how do they survive? How do they get to air their views? Who listens to them? It dawns on me that young persons often get excluded. And because they were not part of the negotiation, they were not consulted. So whatever be the outcome of that consultation, we never sit down well with them. They will never accept it because it never came from them. You will just, I've seen where conflicts are happening in communities and sent for youth leaders, community youth leaders. What the leaders, in quotes now in this context, is the elderly. What they did was to reserve these opportunities either for their relatives who were not involved, who are not even doing anything or working within the peace building space. Okay, so this is where the major problem comes. So most times, the other young persons who feel excluded or who feel shortchanged in their own community feel that, okay, the best way they can be heard is to pick arms. Because if you go to history, government has rewarded, over time has rewarded thugs, either with political appointment or with juicy position. So they feel that thuggery, violence is the way. You understand? So the young people who are non-violent in their approaches often get excluded. While the violent ones quickly get noticed and quickly get rewarded. So it seems that the system is there is a systemic reward for deviance, and where there is no reward for taking leadership and leading that will lead to a positive outcome in terms of peace building context. So I don't know really know how to put it, but is that systemic failure? You understand? So if that has to be addressed first and foremost, getting young people from the onset, they need to be heard. The solution must not come from the most educated. It must not come from the most traveled. I believe every solution is local. Every solution is local. Is to get the local youths involved, even if they cannot speak English or not, their mother tongue, they have solutions that are peculiar. Okay, they will be able to come up with solution, tailor-based solution, because they are closer to the problem. They've lived in the environment for a very long time. They understand the context of their community. Okay, so whosoever that is coming, the development partners, government is coming, whosoever that is coming in the community needs to work with them. Give them the opportunity to speak, to be heard. Okay, because if they are heard, if they feel, yes, that this solution came from us, they will push it. They will honestly support it. And whomsoever that may go against that, the youth will never go along with them. There was something that happened in my community for a very long time. There has been issue of tussle over kingships and all that. But I was very happy when I was engaging. That was last month when I was engaging with the key stakeholders. I love the role that we are able to solve this problem. It was the youth-led that provided the solution. This is what the elders couldn't do for 10 years. It was a tussle of the kingship, but it was the youths who came, who rallied round, who went for election, who campaigned, that even made the governor of the state to give credit. So there was no gunshot. So youth led, and it led to a positive outcome. And the election was concluded on January 10th. So it was a very peaceful one that led to a very peaceful outcome and sustained the traditional institution in that time. This is something that could have led to war. But young people came because they were integrated, they were part of it, they were consulted. They said, okay, this is who we want. Okay, if you want this, they were the one that they designed the electoral process themselves. They were the one that supervised. They were the one, despite the opposition, they listened to themselves. There's a high level of trust between peer-to-peer among young people. Unlike when you are bringing maybe one politician from somewhere trying to, the top political class will only try to balkanize the system among themselves and their children. So, but when young people get involved, they understand the pain. They know, yes, if the community is peaceful, they themselves, their labors will be rewarded. So, and they will live in they've seen how peaceful communities develop. So, youth-led peace-building initiatives needs to be supported. It has to be bottom-top approach. That is for me, and ensuring that the initiative does not die, is integrated into the peace building, maybe the national framework. It is proper due consultation and openness. Transparency is very important. Transparency is locally led peace building. Supporting the local peace builders, it is very important. The principle of primacy of local actors, it is something that is very important in peace building. So when supported, young people will do excellent. Young people are brilliant, they are experts in their own context, because it is that exclusion that often creates doubt, that often leads to distrust, that often feels, this solution, so we are not part of it. It is only for the ones that have gone to Oxford, the ones that have gone to Cambridge, and all that. And there's that feeling of resentment. But once everyone is part of it, I assure you, the process, the outcome, throughout the process, the outcome will be celebrated, and everyone will adopt by it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What you have just shared, the both of you, reminds me of a slogan that normally in the climate change space, when activists are having a campaign, that there's nothing for us without us, which really addresses the lack of representation and inclusion in decision making. There's a whole lot of systemic barriers and policy gaps that need urgent attention, which brings us to our next question. How can international organizations and government provide structural support for sustainable youth-led peace-building efforts? We'll start with you, Chukwudi, and back to Emmanuel.
Okay, thank you. how government and international development partners correlate to support structural peace building effort, right? If I'm right? Okay. So what needs to be done first and foremost? Strengthening local peace architectures. It is very, very important in the sense that local peace architectures just maybe in this context, when I talk about local peace architectures or local peace infrastructures, because context seems to be different in communities. If sometimes what works for A may not work for B, but if it is adapted and contextualized, then the solution works. So governments and development partners need to support the effort of youth peace builders by strengthening could be through training, access to finance, and helping them to build, helping them to sustain, helping them to grow the ideas. Because most times, just what Emmanuel said last time, young people have brilliant ideas. They are doing a lot, but lack of access to funding is always a challenge. And too many bureaucracies to access funding is a major challenge young people have. So I wouldn't know where that distrust have come in, but young people have done my consultation, I've been with the peace building space. It has always been the challenge of funding. If government, because sometimes international development partners, definitely you want to work with government, national or subnational government, as the case may be. But where the challenges comes in is corruption. Because when the funding gets to the government, people in government tend to divert funding. And you will need to have connection or have know someone who is in government to be able to access funding. So that is always a major problem, and it frustrates the effort of local peace builders, which affects the local peace infrastructures on the long run. So sustaining peace infrastructures needs, key access of it is access to funding. Just have to lessen the process and support the genuine ones. If there are proper way or proper documentation, which I know most CBOs, CSOs, youth coalitions have done, but it's always a challenge. Another one is training. There is need to strengthen that partnership between government, CBOs, CSOs, and all of that. All the local peace infrastructures need to be properly integrated so that you don't work in silos. Because that silo mentality is another problem. But if there is transparency in the system, where everyone knows that, okay, if I'm part of this larger body, okay, it gives me access to training, the exposure, and also help me to access funding, then we can have a tailor-based approach in terms of project or programming, peace building programming. You can design or contextualize your project based on the context of your community. Then you are supported to implement, or you are supported to test an idea before you scale. So it is always a challenge. So the government and development partners need to strengthen that effort, need to work closely, because then there's that gap between government and the people at the grassroots level. Is always a problem. I know that our development partners cannot just come, get into a country, and no, it's not possible. But understand the process, but there is need to strengthen the relationship, build a strong partnership between youth organizations, maybe the larger umbrella body in terms of peace building, coalition of peace builders, depending the nomenclature in each country, and grassroots organizations that are very closer to the root, and that maintain that channel of communication and strengthen relationship. It will help to strengthen peace building efforts. And also, and when it is strengthened, young people participate actively in decision making, in policies and all that. They will understand how to hold government accountable. They understand how to be proactive. They understand leadership. They will understand taking responsibility and being an active citizenship, because that is where the problem lies. Everybody understand when young people are aware that, okay, nobody is coming to fix my community for me. There's no savior from coming from anywhere. It is me and responsibility. They will take initiative. They will consult with other people. They will contact them. They learn how to build coalition. They learn how to partner. They will learn how to mobilize resources locally and be able to push for one agenda, which is to build a very peaceful community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, my brother. You've touched pretty much on the ideas that I have, and I would love to provide more of what I believe government and development partners can do. I want to just pose a question for us to think about. We are the young people, we are the youth. We are making very phenomenal contribution to peace building in our communities and in our countries and also on the continent. A conversation comes, a very big high-level dialogue happens in Geneva, Switzerland at the UN headquarters. There's so much incredible impact, so much contribution that have created is not acknowledged at such a high level dialogue in line with the areas that they're passionate about, but they're also working towards and they're contributing. Where do you think that leaves the youth? It leaves us in a space where we feel our efforts are not being acknowledged, where we feel we are not players, yet we are players. That has to be one of the things. Let's take an example in a country like Uganda. There's so many peace building movements that are contributing. But then you find when the reports come, the acknowledgement and contribution is given towards the government, the National Defense Force, for example, the Uganda Police Force, for example. And less is talked about the grassroots movements that are making sure that communities live in harmony, peace prevails, but also people live in such a unity where they feel they need to take and contribute to the growth of that unity. That's how then the youth starts to work against the government, disrupting the peace, because they believe they're not being heard, they're not being acknowledged, and their efforts are not counted. So I believe it's very important to start from the state of acknowledging what the youth are doing, recognizing it locally, internationally, but also making sure that it is seen and their efforts are appreciated. This, in turn, gives more encouragement for movements to even push harder. My brother talked about capacity building, both financial but also technical. There's so many peace building institutions, let's say in our country. There's an institute that is supposed to spread patriotism, that is supposed to be open for all the youth in the country to access military training, in the sense that it makes them appreciate how the military contributes to the peace building of our country. But what happens is that because of that structure that was put up by the government that is in power, youth that are not subscribing to the national to their political party have no access to such an institute. It's extremely very resourced with so much knowledgeable individuals that are in position to build the capacity of the peace builder movement for the youth. But because of political reasoning, political division, you find that movements are not supported. They can't access finance, they can't access technical support, which altogether would strengthen these movements to even do great to scale the impact, but also to mobilize more people to contribute or even to join. So I suggest that the government should offer technical support and financing regardless of the political associations. Most of the factors that contribute displacement, political instability, in the context of my country or Africa, not speaking for the entire of Africa, but according to experience, it's more political than it is other areas. This party does not agree with the person in power. This party, let's take off this person. This party tries to defend themselves, they fight the other. People come from the outside and start to take sides. We like these people, let's be with them, even when what they're pushing is not right. So let's take politics out of peace building. And let's take it from the sense of contributing to the humanity and the rights every person has. Another thing, development partners should truly invest than talking about investing. It's one thing to provide 5 billion in financing for peace building movements, and 80% goes in the overheads in the headquarters, and the VAT and the different transfer fees that have. It's one way for them to go into overheads, but it's the other to truly be invested in the young people. So I believe the investment should surpass the bureaucracy and the protocol that has been set to make sure when they talk about investing, development partners truly invest the biggest portion than the smallest that is left behind. We talk about the policy and the legal framework. Incredible policies, white papers that the youth have come up with and submitted, and the advocacy that has been done. These brilliant ideas should be adopted. Should not just be left in the libraries for reference that the youth are doing something, but should be actualized, put into practice. They should be enforced into the laws. It should be enforced into the policies. Rather than just youth accumulating the knowledge, the experience, and the government gets these papers and shelves them and generate a lot of materials, but yet the content within those materials are not being implemented, are not being adopted, are not being put part of the laws that govern these countries and communities. We should adopt these ideas, we should run with them, we should implement, and this starts with the government. Even before we're talking about development partners that are out of our country, let's our government adopt these ideas and let them seek finance that is poured into our states and our countries. Another way, enhancing dialogue and networking events. There are so many movements that are happening across other countries. Let's say in your country, in Botswana. I was recently in South Africa. There's so much that is happening. In Uganda, there's so much is happening. How can development partners help convene these conversations and discussions that bring all these brilliant young people together, not out of the country, but within the continent, not out of the continent, but within the continent. Why I emphasize that? Because within the continent, when we speak about something that is closest to us, it increases our levels of commitment to the overall needs. That when we speak about something that is extremely far away, our reference and our thinking is not very close. I believe that development partners should convene these conversations, bring together this movement. I know that it's being done, but I'm saying more of it needs to be done. Another area I believe it is very important for the government not to work against the youth. In my country, the government is fighting the youth, is not fighting for the youth. I don't know about your countries. But if you feel being fought, you will defend yourself. And if you defend yourself, the person that is fighting you is going to continue suppressing you. And you're also going to continue. So we are living in that cycle because each one of the government is fighting the youth, then the youth are fighting back. So we are moving in the same cycle. So I believe the government should understand and should appreciate that the youth they should work for the youth, they should work with the youth, but they shouldn't work against the youth. This is why the youth movements, peace building movements, are not highlighted, not appreciated, and not funded. It's because one is other than fighting for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think from this conversation, then we'll be charged to approach the development partners that are present in our country so that we can have those dialogues, especially at regional level, because we should start at regional level, and then that's when we can meet as a continent to integrate and find ways on how we can complement our efforts and share ideas and thoughts. As we are wrapping up our session, what is one key message about youth and peace building that you would like to leave for the audience? We'll start with you, Chukwudi.
Thank you. Youths are agents of peace builders, and they have the power to move for change. So I encourage all the policymakers to tap into the youth's energy, their creativity, their innovation to be able to push the peaceful agenda so that we'll build a peaceful world. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Again, for me, I would borrow from some of the submissions that I've given back. Let development partners, let governments not work against the youth. Let them work with the youth and for the youth. And for us, the youth, let us not just sit back. Let's continue, because whatever that we are doing is in the interest of us, but also the future to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights. I believe that the audience has learned so much as I have. I've had gotten so much key takeaways, and I know that what we're asking for is equitable funding for communities, transparency, and accountability. And I believe that the youth who are listening to this are going to be charged to take up more space in these spaces and not allow themselves to be ashamed. Thank you to our panelists. We have come to the end of our session, and I will give the floor back to Yana.
Wow, it's been wonderful to listen to you both speak. You're both so eloquent, obviously very intelligent, and very compassionate. And I'm sure your communities are lucky to have you. Thank you to Birgit Ben Ely, our events director, and my tech assistant for today. Thank you, Thato, Chukwudi, Emmanuel, for being here with us today. Thank you to our viewers for joining our broadcast. And remember to please join us and take action to be of service at we.net/MLK. And donations are gratefully appreciated at we.net/donate. Goodbye from all of us at We the World.